Chronicle of a Death Foretold by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. The story of Chronicle of a Death Foretold takes place in a quiet, unknown Colombian town situated on the bank of a river. The story starts in the month of August of 1950. Bayardo San Roman, a very rich person of almost 30 years of age with golden eyes, arrives in this unknown town. He has been going from place to place to find a girl to marry. With this intention, he arrives at this unknown town at the beginning of the story. He rents a room in a boarding house there. The boarding house was owned by a landlady. It was situated near the square, near the public square. Bayardo, by nature, was a man who liked noisy festivities and parties. He was a good drinker. He was a good swimmer. He would often swim across the river and come back. This was informed to this narrator by his mother. The narrator of the story was not present in the town when Bayardo San Roman arrived there. The narrator's mother wrote letters to him to inform him about the arrival of Bayardo San Roman. At that time, the narrator of this story was in college, staying in hostel. The narrator actually met Bayardo San Roman during the Christmas of that year. And by then, Bayardo had finalized a contract to marry Angela Vicario, a local girl. Bayardo saw Angela Vicario first time in the month of September. One day, Bayardo was sitting in the parlor of his rented space, and from there he saw a girl crossing the square with her mother. Bayardo was then sitting on a rocking chair. When he saw the mother-daughter duo crossing the square, Bayardo got interested in them. He asked the landlady about the girl because he was so much intrigued by the girl's beauty. When the landlady informed him the name, that it was Angela Vicario, Bayardo closed his eyes and told the landlady to remind him that he would marry the girl when he woke up from that nap. Bayardo and Angela met for the first time in a charity bazaar in the month of October that year. A charity bazaar was a fair because it was a festival time. The time was that of the national holiday. Also, that day was Angela's birthday, but Bayardo San Roman had no idea that that day was Angela's birthday. When Bayardo met Angela Vicario in that fair, in that charity bazaar, Bayardo saw that Angela was very much interested in a music box. Since Bayardo was a very rich person, he wanted to gift that music box to Angela. When Bayardo asked the owner of the shop to sell that music box, The lady owner of the shop informed him that that box was not for sale. It was to be raffled off. It was to be presented in a lottery. But surprisingly, Bayardo wins the lottery and the music box, because Bayardo had already bought all the tickets of the lottery. So that kind of resources Bayardo had as a rich person. And Bayardo sent this music box to Angela's house. Angela's parents were of conservative nature, and they did not like that an unknown person should send a gift to their daughter. Especially Angela's mother, Pura Vicario, was very disappointed at this. When Angela's twin brothers came, Pedro Vicario and Pablo Vicario, both of 24 years of age, the mother asked them to return the music box to the sender, who is staying in a hotel. So the brothers took the music box with them and went to the hotel where Bayardo was staying, to the boarding house where Bayardo was staying. But when the brothers went there, they themselves became greatly infatuated. They themselves became great fan of Bayardo, and they started partying. They started drinking with Bayardo there. And finally, they brought Bayardo San Roman to their home. This was how Bayardo got connected with the Vicario family. Angela Vicario's family was a family of scant resources. They were not so rich. Angela's father, Poncio Vicario, Poncio, Poncio Vicario, was a jeweler. He was a poor man's jeweler, and recently he had turned blind due to his work as a jeweler. Angela's mother, Purissima Vicario, also Pura Vicario, had 2 sons and 5 daughters. She was a school teacher earlier before marriage, and she looked almost like a nun. 2 of her oldest daughters married very late, and a middle daughter died one night out of fever. So I have to modify this information. She had 4 daughters. So the eldest 2 daughters married very late, and the middle daughter died because of fever. The youngest daughter was Angela Vicario. Pura Vicario considered her daughters perfect in household works. She saw to it that they get training in embroidery, cooking, and all the household related works. Pura Vicario would often say that her daughters were perfect. She would also claim that any man will be happy with them because they have been raised to suffer. Angela was the prettiest of all the 4. But often the narrator would notice a helpless air about Angela when she would sit in the window in a destitute, in a very sad mood, when she would sit in the window of her town, of her house. The Vicario family very soon found and they very soon understood that Bayado, son Roman, was very much interested in Angela. And thus, they wanted to know the family of Bayado, son Roman. And one day, Bayado's family arrived at the Vicario family's house. Bayado had brought his father, his mother, and his sister, and the marriage was finalized between Bayado, son Roman, and Angela Vicario. Angela, however, had an objection. She did not want to marry a man who had not courted her. She did not want to marry a man who had not yet expressed his love for her. But the parents imposed their decision on her to accept the prize of destiny. To Angela's objection that love had not yet bloomed between them, to Angela's objection to lack of love, the mother said, "Love can be learned too." So, Angela had to marry without love at the age of 20. Before marriage, Bayado bought a farmhouse for Angela, which she liked very much. The house was owned by a widower, a person whose wife died, a widower. He did not want to sell his house first because the house contained many things which were his wife's memory. But one day, suddenly, Bayado, son Roman, met this widower and said, "Widower, I will buy your house." The widower still did not want to sell the house, but Bayado offered him 10,000 pesos, an amount that the widower could not refuse. Such a huge amount for such a house, because the house actually was not so worth. So therefore, the widower, whose name was Shoes, could not resist, could not refuse, could not reject this offer. He sold the house to Bayado, son Roman. But the widower died 2 months later. Probably he suffered mentally, he suffered inside, since he had sold the things of his wife's memory. Angela had another problem for which she was not very eager to marry Bayado, son Roman. She was not a virgin, in spite of the fact that she was so much watched over by her mother. This was her actual problem. She already had physical relationship, sex before marriage, so she knew that she was not a virgin. She wanted to tell her mother this, but Angela's friends asked her not to tell the mother this secret. Instead, they taught her many tricks, many old wives' tricks to fake her lost possession, her virginity. So Angela got married with this illusion that she would be able to fool her husband about her virginity. Bayardo must have also got married with the illusion of buying happiness with money. As the day of marriage approached, Bayardo's plan for the marriage also increased. He wanted to postpone the marriage by one day, since the bishop would arrive at the town on the next day of their marriage. That was a Monday. Their marriage was scheduled for Sunday, and the bishop would arrive at the town on Monday. He hoped the bishop would bless them, but Angela did not want to be blessed by a man who only cut off the combs for soup and threw the rest of the rooster into the garbage. The bishop liked cockscomb soup, and he would only have the soup of cockscomb, and he would throw the rest of the rooster at the dustbin. And Angela did not like this, and therefore she did not want to be blessed by the bishop. However, things did not proceed as Angela expected. After the wedding ritual, the newly wed couple went to the farmhouse of the widower Shoes. Around midnight, the party broke into fragments. The marriage party was almost over by midnight. Before Bayardo left with his new bride to the farmhouse, he enjoyed a few drinks with the narrator, his friend Santiago Nasser, another friend Cristo Bedoya, and the narrator's brother Luis Enrique. Around midnight, these four, Santiago Nasser, narrator, Cristo Bedoya, and the narrator's brother Luis Enrique, these four went to the prostitute quarter ran by the lady called Maria Alejandrina Cervantes. The Vicario brothers Pablo and Pedro were also present there. All of them again started drinking and singing. Because they wanted to continue the party. These people were there at Maria Alejandria Cervantes until after 3 o'clock. Maria Alejandria Cervantes lived in that house with open doors, with several rooms for rent, and she also kept some mulatto girls there. It was she who did away with the present generation's virginity. Santiago Nasser lost her senses the first time he saw her. She was his mad passion, his mistress at the age of 15. But one day, Santiago's father Ibrahim Nasser drove him out of the bed of Maria. From there, the Vicario brothers Pablo and Pedro went home at around 2 o'clock, and Santiago Nasser and others continued the party there. And at 4 o'clock, they got the idea of going to the widower's farmhouse, the widower's hill farmhouse, and sing for the newlywed couple. At 4 o'clock, all of them came out from Maria Alejandrina Cervantes' house and went near to the hill farmhouse of the widower, where Bayardo and Angela should have been there. But in the meantime, unexpected things unfolded in the lives of the newly wed couple in the farmhouse. Although Bayardo's son Roman was heavily drunk, Angela Vicario did not use any of the tricks she was advised to use by her friends. And she even helped Bayardo discover her secret that she was not a virgin. Following this discovery, Bayardo dragged back her to her home. Pura Vicario was already asleep, but the knock at the door woke her up. Bayardo left Angela there, and the mother started beating her immediately for spoiling the family's honor, for spoiling the family's reputation. This revelation was a great shock for the mother. She has raised her daughters in the most conservative fashion. The brothers were brought up to be men. The girls had been reared up to get married. The girls were trained in all the household works like embroidery, sewing by machine, weaving, washing, ironing, making artificial flowers, and fancy candy. Pura Vicario often would claim, they are perfect. Any man will be happy with them. But now, Angela Vicario has brought such disrepute to the family by losing her virginity before marriage. When the brothers returned, they also came to know about this revelation, and they demanded the name of the person who had violated Angela's virginity. Angela thought about many names and then declared it was Santiago Nasar. The brothers immediately took up the responsibility of killing Santiago Nasar to restore the family's honor, to restore the family's reputation, respect. While all this unfolded in the Vicario household, Santiago Nasar, the narrator, Cristo Bedoya, and Luis Enrique were singing outside the farmhouse. They had no idea that there was no one inside that house. Pointing at a flickering light at the sea, Santiago said that it was the torment soul of a slave ship that sunk at a distance from the harbor. He had no idea that Angela's married life had come to an end 2 hours back. After this, Santiago Nasar went to his house along with Cristo Bedoya. The narrator went back to Maria Alejandrina Cervantes. Luis Enrique went on his way to home, and on the way, Luis Enrique stopped at Clotilde Armenta's store. Clotilde Armenta's store was on the opposite side of the square in front of Santiago Nasar's house. There, Luis Enrique met the Vicario brothers. They told and showed him a knife and told him that they were going to kill Santiago Nasar. The Vicario brothers told Luis Enrique this. They asked Luis Enrique where Santiago Nasar was. But Luis Enrique was so drunk that he answered Santiago Nasar was dead. But the Vicario brothers did not notice that Santiago Nasar reached home at 4:20. They were waiting at that store of Clotilde Armenta, but they did not notice that Santiago Nasser had already reached home at 4:20 a.m. After reaching home, Santiago Nasser immediately threw himself onto his bed, since he planned to wake up in 1 hour, after 1 hour, because he would go to the docks for the bishop's arrival. Before falling asleep, Santiago asked the housemaid Victoria Guzman to ask her daughter Divina Flor to wake him up at 5:30 a.m. An instant after Santiago Nasser fell asleep, a moment after Santiago Nasser fell asleep, a milk beggar visited Victoria Guzman, the housemaid. She informed Victoria Guzman that she had come to know from Clotilde Armenta that Vicario brothers were waiting to kill Santiago Nasser. In fact, by this time, many people in the town came to know about this planned murder. The brothers told the narrator later that they first went to Maria Alejandrina Cervantes' place to look for Santiago Nasser. But it was not an authentic reporting according to the author. What was known was that Pablo and Pedro picked 2 knives from the pigsty as soon as Santiago's name was revealed. Then they went to the meat market to sharpen them, those knives, 2 knives. At 3:20 a.m., a butcher friend, Faustino Santos, saw them there, and he heard the Vicario brothers informing people that they were preparing to kill Santiago Nasser. Nobody paid any attention to their claim, but Faustino Santos saw a glimmer of truth. Faustino Santos saw some truth in Pablo Vicario's claim. Faustino Santos reported this claim of the 2 brothers to the policeman, who came a little later to buy some liver for the mayor's breakfast. The mayor was Leandro Pronoy. From the meat market, the Vicario brothers came directly to Clotilde Armenta's store at 4:10 a.m. They waited there drinking liquor and informed Clotilde Armenta that they would kill Santiago Nasser. They also said that Santiago knew why they would kill him. Clotilde informed this to her husband, who had been sleeping. The husband said that the Vicario brothers were not the type of killing others. The Vicario brothers were not that type of persons who would kill others. Clotilde then returned to the store and saw the police officer Leonardo Pornoy, the police officer who was there in the meat market. He had now arrived at Clotilde Armenta's store, and Clotilde Armenta saw the police officer Leandro Pornoy speaking with the Vicario brothers. They showed the police officer Pornoy the knives, and they told him also their plan. The officer went back to the mayor's house and informed the mayor. The officer immediately went back to the mayor's house, and he informed the mayor, Colonel Lazaro Aponte, about the brothers' plan. Also, Aponte's wife told him after he finished his breakfast that Bayardo San Roman had brought Angela Vicario back home. Immediately, the mayor, Colonel Lazaro Aponte, could connect 2 things. He then immediately went to Clotilde Armenta's store. Later, he informed the narrator that the time was almost 5 o'clock, and on his way, three people informed him of the Vicario brothers' plan. He met the brothers there in the store of Clotilde Armenta, took their knives and sent them back home to sleep, telling them that the bishop would be greatly hurt if he found them in that condition. The bishop was arriving at that town on that Monday morning. They left, but Clotilde Armenta did not like the fact that the mayor did not arrest them. While at the store, the Vicario brothers had revealed their plan to more than a dozen people who had gone there to buy milk. And this news immediately spread all over the town before 6 o'clock. Only the house across the road was unaware of this news. Clotilde asked everyone to warn Santiago if they saw him. She even sent word to Father Amador, the church father. She sent a beggar woman with this urgent message to Victoria Guzman. The Vicario brothers went home. Till then, the elder of the twins, Pablo Vicario, was only following the decision of Pedro to kill Santiago. Pablo was 6 minutes older than Pedro. Pablo considered his duty fulfilled when the mayor took away the knives. But after going home, Pablo became more eager to kill Santiago. He took another 2 knives, and then they went again to the meat market to sharpen them. Faustino Santos informed that this time also they shouted people to hear that they were going to cut Santiago Nasser's guts out. Seeing them again, Faustino Santos thought that they were kidding around. They were making jokes. From there, the Vicario brothers first went to the house of Prudencia Cortes, Pablo's fiancée. They had coffee there in the house of Prudencia Cortes. Prudencia already knew what they were up to, what was their plan. She later informed the narrator that she would not have married Pablo if he did not do what a man should do. From there, the Vicario brothers went to Clotilde Armenta's store for the second time that morning. She noticed that the brothers were not so confident, not so resolute this time. Padre Vicario even shaved with his butcher knife there. Meanwhile, many false customers arrived at the store only to see whether the rumor that they heard was true or not. The Vicario brothers kept on waiting, but they never saw that Santiago Nasser was already inside his house at 4:20. This was because Santiago Nasser entered the house through the back door. Clotilde Armenta's store was across the street in front of the front gate of the house. Everybody, including Vicario brothers, knew that Santiago would never stop at Clotilde Armenta's store because Santiago would enter the house through the back door, and Clotilde Armenta's store was opposite to the front door of the house. Still, the Vicario brothers waited there that morning, arriving twice. Santiago Nasser was the son of Ibrahim Nasser, who was one of the last Arabs that had settled in this quiet riverside town. Ibrahim Nasser died 3 years back, and Santiago had to abandon his studies to take care of the family ranch, which is called the Divine Face. Santiago had turned 21 last week of January of 1951, only a few days before Bayado Angela disaster. Santiago's mother, Placida Linero, had a tolerant marriage. She had to tolerate a marriage of convenience without a single moment of happiness. This might be more because of Ibrahim Nasser's lifestyle. Ibrahim Nasser had an affair with Victoria Guzman, the housemaid, and made love to her several years in the stable of the ranch. Later, he brought her into the house as a house servant. Santiago Nasser has inherited some of the qualities of his father. He ogled at Victoria Guzman and her daughter Divina Flor. He would often grab Divina Flor by the wrist or would touch her private parts. Victoria Guzman kept close watch over Divina Flor's safety within the household due to this immoral behavior of Santiago Nasser. Though Santiago would have some relationship with somebody outside the town, inside the town he maintained only 2 relationships, one with his fiancée Flora Miguel and another with Maria Alejandrina Cervantes, which lasted for 14 months only. Santiago Nasser slept for just a few minutes more than 1 hour. He woke up at 5:30 that Monday morning. He had a dream of birds and trees. Placida Linero, the mother, told the narrator 27 years later that Santiago told her this dream that morning. While Placida Linero shared her memory of 27 years back to the narrator, at that moment she almost thought that the narrator was her son Santiago Nasser. Placida Linero had a reputation of being an interpreter of dreams, provided it was told her before eating. That day, Placida Linero did not find anything ominous, anything wrong in the dreams of Santiago Nasser. Santiago on Mondays normally would wear khaki outfit, khaki dress and riding boots, riding shoes to go to the family cattle ranch, which is called the Divine Face. But that morning Santiago dressed in white linen cloth because the bishop was arriving. Placida Linero told him that dreams of birds meant good health. So Placida Linero told Santiago that there was nothing wrong in his dreams. After meeting her, Santiago went to the enormous kitchen of his house. As usual, tried to touch the private parts of Divina Flor. Even when Victoria Guzman was cutting 3 rabbits, pulling out the insides of the rabbits and throwing the guts to the dogs there. After having some coffee, Santiago went out of the house through the front door of the house, which would be later called, which door would be later known as the fatal door. Many years later, Victoria Guzman admitted that both she and Divina Flor already knew that the Vicario brothers were waiting for Santiago. They told the author, the narrator, that the beggar woman had already informed them about this after 5 o'clock. But even later, Divina Flor informed the narrator that she did not warn Santiago because she wanted them to kill him. As Santiago went out through the front door, he did not notice that someone had pushed in an envelope with a piece of paper describing about the brothers' plan, the brothers' plot. As Santiago crossed the square along with other men rushing towards the dock, rushing towards the riverside for the bishop's arrival, Pedro Vicario started to stand up. Clotilde Armenta murmured them to leave him. Clotilde Armenta requested them to leave him for later, at least to respect the bishop. The brothers consented, the brothers agreed, and they sat down. So Santiago Nasser arrived at the dock at the riverside. The dock was full of people coming there with rooster as a gift. People came there with cocks, male cocks, rooster as a gift to the bishop, since the bishop liked cockscomb soup. But as Placido Linero predicted, as Placido Linero said earlier to Santiago Nasser, the bishop's boat did not stop. The bishop only made sign of cross, and the boat continued to glide. Santiago met many people there. Cristo Bedoya was also there. The mayor, Lazaro Aponte, Father Carmen Amador, all of them were there. But none bothered to warn Santiago, since they thought he had been already warned. Only, quite strangely, the narrator's sister Margot did not know this. Most of the people there knew it. Only one person, according to the narrator, did not know the plan of the Vicario brothers. His sister Margot. Even more strangely, the narrator's mother also did not know this, although the narrator's mother had the power of divination. The narrator's mother had this power of divination. This power of divination enabled the narrator's mother to know what was ahead of time, to know things ahead of time, to know what was going to happen in future. But that particular day, she also even did not know about this future happening. But that day she failed to see the future. After the bishop left, the news of Angela Vicario became the talk of the town, and the Vicario brothers were waiting for Santiago narrator to kill him. This news also became the talk of the town. Meanwhile, Santiago Nasser and Cristo Bedoya started walking back towards the square. Both of them were unaware of what almost everybody else in the town knew. Only these two friends did not know, Santiago Nasser himself and his friend Cristo Bedoya. Cristo Bedoya was surprised by the strange look of people. He was very surprised by the strange look people were throwing at them. Only Yamil Shayum, an Arab, a person of Arab origin, who was a friend of Ibrahim Nasser, decided to take the matter to Santiago. So only Yamil Shayum decided to warn Santiago Nasser. But then he decided that he would first discuss the matter with Cristo Bedoya. So instead of first telling Santiago Nasser, he decided to first talk to Cristo Bedoya. So he met the two friends in front of his store, in front of his shop. Only after Santiago left Cristo Bedoya, Yamil Shayam sought clarification from Cristo Bedoya regarding the rumor. So after Santiago Nasser left, then only Yamil Shayam asked Cristo Bedoya about the rumor. The moment Cristo Bedoya heard about the plot of the Vicario brothers, he ran towards the direction of the square to caution Santiago Nasser. But Santiago Nasser had vanished after he took the final turn towards the square. Cristo Bedoya thought Santiago had already reached home, and he rushed directly towards that direction. He found that the front door of the house is open, and he went in and asked first Divina Flor and then Placida Linero about Santiago's whereabouts. The time was 6:56. He found Santiago's wristwatch in his room while looking for Santiago. The time in that wristwatch was 6:58. But both Divina Flor and Placida Linero answered that Santiago Nasser had not returned yet. A confused Cristo Bedoya went out in search of Santiago Nasser. As he crossed the square, Pedro Vicario shouted at him from Clotilde Armenta's store to tell Santiago Nasser that they were waiting to kill him. On his way, Cristo Bedoya met Father Amador and the Mayor Lazaro Aponte and explained them the dangerous situation, but they did not give much importance to the matter. Then Cristo Bedoya ran towards the narrator's house, thinking Santiago had gone there for breakfast. But during this time, Santiago was at the house of his fiancée, Flora Miguel. This family would always wake up late at 12 in the noon because they followed the advice of Nahir Miguel, the wise man of the community. But that morning, the noise of the bishop's boat woke Flora Miguel early. And shortly after waking, she found out the Vicario brothers' plan, and she also came to know the reason behind the Vicario brothers' anger over Santiago Nasser. She did not think that they would actually kill him. She thought that they would force Santiago to marry Angela Vicario to give her back her honor. But she suffered great humiliation after hearing this rumor. When Santiago entered his fiance's house, there were so many people taking positions in the square that someone or other would have seen him going into that house. But nobody later claimed that he or she noticed this visit of Santiago Nasser. Nobody claimed that he or she knew that Santiago Nasser had entered his fiance's house. The moment he entered the room, Flora Miguel shouted at him. Nahir Miguel, the father, then presented the reason of this anger to Santiago Nasser. So Flora Miguel did not explain the reason of her anger. Her father, Nahir Miguel, explained the reason of Flora's anger. Later, Nahir Miguel told the narrator that Santiago did not have the slightest idea about the rumor and the accusation. So when Santiago heard this accusation, he expressed great shock He did not have any idea about this rumor, about this accusation. Nahir Miguel asked Santiago Nasser either to stay in that house or to go out with his rifle in case he faced the danger of attack. But Santiago Nasser just left the house saying he did not understand what actually was going on. The people had already taken positions around the square to watch the climax of the drama. They all saw Santiago come out of Nahir Miguel's house. Yamil Shayum shouted to Santiago to hide in his store. Clotilde Armenta tried to stop Pedro Vicario by grabbing him by the shirt while shouting to Santiago to run. A panicky Santiago ran towards the front door of the house. The door was opened till a few seconds back. Meanwhile, Santiago's mother, Placida Linero, was told by Divina Flor that she had seen Santiago enter the house through the square door, through the front door, and she had seen Santiago go up to the bedroom a minute ago. Placida Linero saw through the front door that the Vicario brothers were running towards the house with knives on their hands. From her position, she did not see that her own son Santiago was also running towards the door from a different angle, from a different direction. So she could only see the Vicario brothers running towards that door. Placida Linero wanted to stop the Vicario brothers from entering the house and killing her son. So she immediately closed the door from inside. The same moment, she heard Santiago shouting, but she thought Santiago was already upstairs and he was insulting the Vicario brothers from the balcony. But that was the moment when the brothers butchered Santiago to death by thrusting their knives into his stomach. But strangely, when Pedro sunk his knife into Santiago's side and then pulled out the knife kept coming out clean. He later informed this to the investigator that even after 3 times of stabbing him, there wasn't a drop of blood. And when they stabbed Santiago on the back, spurt of blood sprinkled out and soaked them. At the same time, Santiago himself looked like laughing. At last, Pablo Vicario slashed Santiago's stomach horizontally, and then all his intestines exploded out. Santiago Nasser could see his own viscera. When Santiago fell down, the Vicario brothers ran towards the nearby church. Although Yamil, Shayom and other Arabs followed him, the brothers were already inside the church. Santiago stood up and while holding his own intestines in his hand, walked towards the rear entrance, walked towards the back door of the house, entered the kitchen and fell down there almost on the verge of death, where he died a few moments later. The Vicario brothers were immediately put in jail by the mayor, while he ordered an autopsy, a post-mortem by Father Carmen Amador. Since the regular doctor Dioncio Iquiran was out of town, the Vicario brothers plunged in a horrible existence since they could not get rid of the smell of Santiago. They continued to smell Santiago. Although they washed the blood from their arms and faces, they couldn't get rest nor sleep because they are continuously haunted by that smell. Later, Pedro told the narrator that he was awake for almost 11 months. Pablo couldn't eat any lunch, and then a severe diarrhea attacked him. Pedro complained that the Turks, the Arabs, have poisoned him by some trick. But till then, they were having food and water sent by their mother, Pura Vicario. All these circumstances forced the mayor to transfer them to the prison in Riohacha. The horrible scene of the murder even had some mysterious effects. Colonel Lazaro Aponte, who had earlier seen many massacres, ended up being a vegetarian and spiritualist. When the narrator presented his bare body to Maria Alejandrina Cervantes on Tuesday afternoon, she slipped away from him, saying he smelled like the dead person. Earlier, a lady called Bonte had the illusion that the two knives with which the brothers were walking are full of blood. But at that moment, the Vicaria brothers did not kill Santiago Nasser. So this lady, Hortensia Bonte, had a wrong vision. She saw an illusion that the knives were full of blood and they were carrying bloody knives. Probably because of the early morning weak light, she saw this. But after Santiago's death, she sank into severe repentance. She felt very depressed, and one day she ran out naked into the street. The farmhouse of Widow Shoes presented another mystery. It was informed to the narrator years later. Things started disappearing from this abandoned house. Colonel Lazaro Aponte one day held a spiritual seance, spiritual ritual, and the soul of Yolanda Shoes, the wife of Widower Shoes, the soul of Yolanda Shoes confirmed in her own handwriting that she was recovering the knick-knack or small ornaments of her happiness, of her liking. So it was confirmed during that spiritual ritual, during that spiritual seance, that the soul of Yolanda Shoes herself had informed through her handwriting that she was picking up things from that house. Even on the Saturday following Santiago Nasser's murder, Widower Shoes told the mayor that the soul of his wife appeared in the form of a bird and demanded what was hers. So Shoes also informed the mayor appointed that he saw the soul of his wife demanding her own things. The autopsy report by Father Carmen Amador mentioned about the stab wounds, but the report specially talked about the case of hepatitis that Santiago suffered from at the age of 12. He wrote that Santiago would have lived only a few years in any case. The final report concluded that the cause of death had been a massive hemorrhage brought about by the wounds. Most of those who would have prevented the crime took the pretext of honor. They said that honor is a sacred matter, that individuals who are affected by such matter could author the drama of honor. So for them, honor is a very sacred matter, and those people who are affected by such matter had the liberty of doing anything for the sake of honor. That was what the pretext of people. Even the narrator's mother once told, honor is love. This was foretold by even Prudentia Cotes' mother. When the Vicario brother hurried to Clotilde Amenta's store from their house, Prudentia Cotes' mother said, honor does not wait. When the two brothers arrived at the church with two bloody knives, the priest, Father Carmen Amador, told that they showed great dignity through their surrender. The brothers claimed that they were innocent, although they had killed Santiago Nasser, since it was a matter of honor. Father Amador also accepted that they were perhaps innocent in the eyes of the God. Majority of the people felt sad for Bayardo San Roman. They accepted that the other three characters in the tragedy were only playing their roles that life had assigned to them. Santiago had accepted the punishment for his wrongdoings, and the brothers proved their status as men. The Vicario brothers spent 3 years in Rioja prison awaiting trial because they could not afford the amount for bail. They never displayed even the least amount of remorse. They were set free after some years. Pablo Vicario married Prudencia Cotes. Pedro took a job in the armed forces. The rest of the family moved to Menuer, a town near Rioja. There was also this fear that the Arabs would plan a revenge. The Arabs were a group of peaceful immigrants. They mostly sold colored clothes and bazaar trinkets, small things. They were Catholic people. The older ones continued speaking Arabic that they had brought from their homeland. Most of the third generation Arabs used Spanish. So Santiago Nasser and Ibrahim Nasser used to talk in Arabic, but during Placido Linero's presence they used Spanish. It was inconceivable that they would suddenly change their soft character to avenge a death. Nobody even thought that Placido Linero's family would take any action. Still, the mayor Lazaro Aponte visited the Arab families. He found them sad, but none had the idea of revenge. They ran after the Vicario brothers that morning only out of the heat of the crime. Even if they could caught the brothers that day, they would have only beaten them. At the same time, their centenary matriarch Susanna Abdallah has performed a ritual with flour and absinthe that had dried up Pablo Vicario's cholerin and increased Pedro's florid flow. 12 days after the crime, the investigating magistrate submitted a report after verifying witnesses. The narrator went through this report 20 years after it was submitted. The report said that there was not a single evidence to suggest that Santiago Nasser had been the cause of the wrong. The friends of Angela Vicario informed that she had shared her secret with them since before wedding, but she hadn't revealed any name to them. When the investigating magistrate asked Angela Vicario about precise details of how and where the act took place, she would not provide any detail. He concluded that Santiago's very behavior during his last hours was overwhelming proof of his innocence. This lack of proof against Santiago made the magistrate write that Santiago Nasser had become the victim of prejudice. Even the narrator was earlier aware of the prejudice against the Arabs or Turks in that society. Some people were prejudiced against Santiago since he belonged to a rich family. Santiago himself was aware of this prejudice. So Santiago would have shown great concern if he really had committed the crime. Still, prejudice stopped people from seeing him visiting Flora Miguel's house. The magistrate's report even mentions this. There were so many people present in the square, but still the magistrate did not find a single person who saw Santiago entering that house. The narrator himself was very sure that Santiago Nasser was not the real cause of Angela Vicario's damage. He says that they means Santiago Nasser and Angela Vicario, they belonged to two different worlds. None had ever seen them together, much less alone together. So nobody had seen them even alone together. Santiago Nasser was too haughty, too proud to have noticed her. Santiago Nasser was full of pride to give any importance to Angela Vicario. So people thought Angela Vicario was protecting someone else who really loved her. But she did not reveal the name of that person. Instead, she took the name of Santiago Nasser. She only took Santiago Nasser's name because she thought her brothers would never dare to go up against him, because Santiago Nasser was a very rich person. So she did not perhaps reveal the name of the real person. She took the name of Santiago Nasser, thinking that her brothers would not dare to act against such a rich person in that society. But when 23 years after the drama, the narrator met Angela Vicario and presented her this question, she requested him not to pester her, she requested him not to ask her this question, saying he was the one. But Angela revealed another secret of her life to the narrator, which nobody knew. She told the narrator that Bayardo San Roman had been forever in her life since that fatal night. When she lived a mature, lonely life with her mother busy in her embroidery work, Bayardo had great presence in her life. But she had not yet met Bayardo again. But she continuously thought about Bayardo during all these years. One day, when she took her mother to get her eyes examined in the hospital at Riohacha, she saw Bayardo pass by without seeing her. That day, she was reborn. She went crazy over him. Towards the end of that week, unable to get a moment's rest, she wrote him the first letter. She wrote how she saw him come out of the hotel. There was no reply. After 2 months, she sent him another letter. But this time also she got no reply. Within 6 months, she wrote 6 letters with no reply. She continued writing letters. The more she wrote, the more she burned inside, as if she became again a virgin just for Bayard San Roman. She wrote a weekly letter for over half a lifetime. The letters were like from a fiancé or from a secret lover. The letters were like love documents or from an abandoned wife. But she got no reply. It was like writing to nobody. But she kept on writing for 17 years. One August morning, while she was embroidering with her friends in the room, she heard someone coming to the door. She did not look up to see who it was, but she told the narrator that she knew it was Bayard San Roman wearing a shirt soaked in sweat, with glasses on his eyes and beginning to lose his hair. He was there with 2 suitcases. In one suitcase there was clothing to stay. The other suitcase contained almost 2,000 letters, arranged by date in bundles tied with colored ribbons, and all unopened